In the sunlit kitchen of their Boulder, Colorado home, Thomas Bennett stood at the granite countertop assembling sandwiches while his wife Rachel diced fruit for their children's lunches. Morning light poured through the window above the sink, illuminating motes of dust in the air and the cheerful yellow walls. It should have been a scene of domestic tranquility, a husband and wife working in easy rhythm, their two kids chattering at the table over breakfast. But under the veneer of routine, something felt off. 14-year-old Sophia Bennett sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, skimming the local news as she spooned cereal into her mouth. She had her father's sharp brown eyes and an inquisitive tilt to her brow, the look of someone perpetually on the verge of asking a question. Across from her, 10-year-old Noah was absent-mindedly tinkering with a small gadget, a prototype sensor for a home security app he'd been coding for fun. A half-eaten waffle lay on his plate. He was a wiry kid with bright curiosity practically sparking off him, already dreaming of building robots and writing code that could change the world. Thomas glanced over his shoulder at his children and smiled softly. This was what he cherished, these quiet family mornings before the rush of the day. He was a tall man in his early 40s with neatly combed sandy hair and a warm if weary demeanor. As an environmental engineer working with a nearby tech firm, he often left early and returned late, but he always tried to start the day with his family. Beside him, Rachel was slicing apples with practiced efficiency. She was a few years younger than Thomas in her late 30s, with wavy chestnut brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Owning a yoga studio, a franchise she'd launched 2 years ago, had given her an athletic glow. Even at this early hour, she appeared poised and energetic in her leggings and tank top. "Don't forget, I have yoga class at 10, Rachel murmured as she snapped lids onto 2 lunch containers. Her tone was casual, but Thomas caught a note of preoccupation beneath it. He nodded. "I remember. I'll drop Noah off at his science club after school so you don't have to rush back." They had a well-oiled system for juggling the kids' activities and their own work. Normally, the coordination comforted him, but lately he'd sensed a subtle change in Rachel. She often seemed distracted, her phone always within arm's reach. At the table, Noah held up the gadget he'd been fiddling with, a small circuit board wired to a motion sensor. "Mom, Dad, check it out. I'm going to install this by the front door. It'll log whenever someone comes in or out." His blue eyes shone with excitement. Thomas chuckled and wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Our very own security system, huh? Just what we need." Rachel paused in packing Sophia's lunch and gave Noah an indulgent smile. "As long as it doesn't send an electric shock to guests like last time," she teased gently. Noah's cheeks flushed. "That was an accident, and it was just a tiny jolt," he protested. Sophia snickered behind her cereal bowl. Thomas laughed under his breath. Noah was forever tinkering, turning the house into a laboratory of small experiments. Last month, he had rigged a burglar alarm that accidentally zapped Thomas when he came home late. It hadn't been dangerous, more startling than anything, but they'd had a family rule since. Noah's inventions required parental approval before installation. Rachel shook her head with a mild laugh and returned to the sink. "Just be careful, honey. We don't need the mailman suing us for getting his hand singed by our doorbell." Her words were light, but as she spoke, her phone buzzed on the counter. Thomas saw her eyes dart reflexively toward the screen. In that brief moment, her whole face softened, an unguarded, pleased expression. She quickly reached for the phone and angled the screen away from Thomas before he could glimpse the message. A tiny prickle of curiosity, or was it unease, tugged at Thomas. They often shared their texts openly, reading funny messages from friends or scheduling details aloud. Rachel's subtle secrecy was new. He busied himself by sealing the sandwich baggies, pretending not to notice, but out of the corner of his eye, he watched her. Rachel's thumbs flew over the phone keyboard, responding with a quick efficiency. As she typed, a small smile played on her lips, one she tried to suppress. She glanced back toward the table where the kids were now debating something about school projects. When she lifted her gaze to Thomas, their eyes met, only for an instant. Thomas could have sworn she looked guilty, or was he imagining it? She slipped the phone face down onto the counter and cleared her throat. "Sophia, did you print your English essay for class?" she asked, turning toward the table with forced brightness. Sophia, without looking up from her laptop, replied, "Already did," and emailed a copy to Mr. Bell just in case. "Always prepared," Thomas noted proudly. His daughter's diligence never ceased to impress him. Rachel nodded and gave a distracted smile. "That's my girl." But her mind seemed elsewhere as she wiped a speck of butter off the counter with unnecessary focus. Thomas walked over to place the finished lunches into the kids' backpacks. As he passed by Rachel, he couldn't help but glance down at the phone she'd set aside. The screen was dark now. Only one thing stood out: the contact name above a preview of the last text, still visible in the notification banner. It was just a single letter, M. Next to it was a heart emoji. Thomas's hands froze mid-motion, the lunch containers hovering over Noah's open backpack. M. His first thought was of her friend Marissa, who often messaged Rachel funny memes. But Marissa's texts usually displayed her full name. And why a heart emoji? In the split second he deliberated, Rachel briskly picked up her phone and clicked the screen off entirely, shoving it into her leggings pocket. "Thanks for packing lunch, hun," she said, leaning in to kiss Thomas on the cheek, perhaps to distract him. He caught a whiff of her shampoo, lavender and mint. It was a familiar comfort, yet now a thread of tension wound through the gesture. "No problem," he murmured, automatically kissing her back. Her lips were warm but perfunctory against his skin. He searched her face for a clue, any clue, to the flutter he'd seen in her expression moments ago. But Rachel's smile was the picture of normalcy again. Maybe he had imagined that flicker of guilt. "Gotta grab my yoga bag from upstairs," Rachel said lightly, already moving out of the kitchen. "Soph, don't forget to put your laptop away. And Noah, shoes on, buddy. We leave in 5. As Rachel left the room, Thomas exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His heart thumped just a little harder than usual. He told himself he was being silly. After all, a single M with a heart could indeed be Marissa, or any number of friends. Perhaps a glitch saved it oddly. Or maybe it was some promotional thing from the yoga studio headquarters. He tried to shake it off. Trust was the foundation of their marriage, and he'd never had reason to doubt her. They'd been married for 15 years, and despite the normal ebbs and flows, they'd always seemed solid. He prided himself on being a supportive husband and father. Rachel's yoga studio, Radiant Yoga, the Boulder franchise of a popular chain, was her passion project. He'd encouraged her to invest in it and stood by her through the long hours of setup and marketing. The studio had grown steadily. She even taught a few classes there aside from managing it. She'd made new friends, gotten fitter and more confident, all positives. So why did his mind now conjure up the possibility that M might not be an innocuous friend at all? "Dad, you okay?" Sophia's voice jolted him from his thoughts. She was standing beside him, slipping her laptop into her backpack. Thomas realized he was still holding Noah's lunch in midair. "Oh, yeah, just thinking about a work thing," he fibbed, placing the container into the bag and zipping it up. Sophia studied him for a second. She had a perceptive gaze that often made him feel like she could see right through his facades. It was the journalist in her, but she only said, "Don't forget, you promised to sign my permission slip for the field trip." "Of course." Thomas patted his pockets for a pen. "Where is it?" "In my binder by the front door. I'll grab it." Sophia padded out of the kitchen. Noah came bounding over, one sneaker on and the other in his hand. "Dad, can we test the sensor this afternoon? If it works, maybe we can install more and link them to my app." Thomas mustered a grin for his son. He ruffled Noah's hair. "Sure, champ. We'll take a look after dinner. How about that?" "Awesome," Noah beamed, hopping on one foot as he tugged on his second shoe. When Sophia returned with the permission slip, Thomas took the pen she offered and quickly signed the form against the countertop. His mind, however, wandered back to Rachel's phone. M? And that smile. That subtle, private smile meant for the phone screen, not for him. He handed the signed slip back to Sophia, who tucked it safely away. The family began their well-practiced dance of grabbing backpacks, jackets, and keys. Thomas forced himself to focus on the present. He had to get the kids to school on time, and he had an 8:30 meeting at work. There was no time to dwell on random texts. Yet as they filed out the door, Noah running ahead to test press his sensor by the threshold, prompting a rapid series of beeps on his phone. Sophia rolling her eyes at her brother's antics, and Rachel locking up behind them. Thomas stole another glance at his wife. She was scrolling quickly through that phone again, biting her lower lip until she noticed him watching. Then, just as swiftly, she clicked the screen off and flashed him a distracted smile. Thomas's chest tightened. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was everything. He didn't know it yet, but that moment was the first fracture of morning, a subtle fault line that would soon split their world apart. Chapter 2. A Daughter's Investigation. Sophia's instincts told her something was wrong. That morning at the breakfast table, she had caught the subtle tension in her parents' exchange. The way her mother's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The way her father fell silent holding Noah's lunch. She pretended not to notice at the time, but it lingered in her mind on the drive to school. As the family SUV wound through the tree-lined streets of Boulder, Sophia sat in the backseat next to Noah, earphones in but music paused, quietly observing. Rachel drove, occasionally humming along with the radio, while Thomas sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, lost in thought. Normally, her dad would be chatting about everyone's plans for the day, or reminding them about chores or after-school pickups. Today, he was uncharacteristically quiet. Meanwhile, her mom tapped her fingers on the steering wheel to the beat of the song, a tad too upbeat. It felt forced. When they pulled up to drop Sophia and Noah at their respective schools, the middle school was right next door to the high school, Rachel cheerfully wished them luck on their day. Thomas managed a distracted, "Have a good day, kiddos," before Sophia climbed out, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. Noah had already scampered off toward his fifth-grade classroom, excitedly waving to a friend. Sophia shut the car door and watched as her parents drove away. Through the rear window, she could see her father rubbing his temple, her mother saying something to him with a concerned glance. There it was again, that sense of something unspoken passing between them. The rest of the school day, Sophia found herself replaying the morning in her head. She prided herself on noticing things that others missed. It was what made her a good reporter for the school blog. And she definitely hadn't imagined the unease in her father's eyes. During lunch, Sophia slipped into the library and logged into the family's cell phone account using credentials she remembered from before. Her heart pounded as she pulled up her mother's recent call and text logs. She felt a twinge of guilt. This was snooping, plain and simple. But an even stronger feeling propelled her: protectiveness. If something was troubling her dad, she wanted to know why. The logs loaded, displaying a list of phone numbers and timestamps. Scanning down, she saw plenty of familiar entries. Calls to Thomas, hubby, at dad's number, a bunch to yoga reception, the studio's front desk, several to Marissa and to grandma. Then, Sophia's eyes snagged on something odd, a series of calls and texts over the past few weeks to a number that wasn't saved under a name, just an out-of-state area code. Dozens of messages were being exchanged frequently, often at odd hours and for long stretches. Some had occurred well after 11 p.m., long after her mom usually went to bed. Sophia quickly saved the log showing dozens of late-night messages with that mystery number, including one exchange at 6:45 a.m. that very morning just before breakfast. Her hands felt cold as she noted the pattern. The evidence, as circumstantial as it was, made her stomach twist. It could be something innocuous, perhaps a prospective client or a new instructor Rachel was coordinating with for the studio. But why not save the contact? And why so many late-night texts? Sophia didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her father's pained expression flashed in her memory. What if her mom was hiding something that would hurt them all? After school, Sophia's suspicions only deepened. Rachel was supposed to pick her up at 3:30 after yoga class and studio duties, but at 3:45, her mother still hadn't arrived. It wasn't the first time in recent weeks that Rachel had been late or preoccupied. Usually, Sophia would shrug it off. Her mom was busy running a business. But now it fed her worries. Eventually, the familiar SUV rolled up by the curb. Sophia climbed in, noting at once the flushed look on her mother's face. Rachel's hair was slightly mussed, cheeks pink as if she'd hurried. Sorry, she exclaimed. Class ran over and then a client had questions. It's okay, Sophia said slowly, buckling her seatbelt. Her eyes flicked down to her mom's phone sitting in the cup holder. She recognized the number on the screen, the same unsaved one ending in 38. A new text notification banner was visible for a split second before Rachel clicked the phone off with an almost guilty speed. Sophia's heart pounded. She pretended not to notice and looked out the window. "How was your day, Mom?" she asked, trying to sound normal. "Oh, busy as ever," Rachel replied, a touch of strain in her voice that she attempted to mask with cheerfulness. Class was full, and I had a meeting with the franchise's regional manager about expanding our class schedule. Good stuff, just a lot at once. Sophia nodded. The explanation sounded reasonable on the surface, yet she felt certain that meeting wasn't the whole story of what made her mom late. As they drove home, Sophia resolved on a plan. She would gather concrete evidence before saying anything to her father. If her mother was truly cheating, the word formed darkly in her mind, then confronting her without proof could tear the family apart prematurely. But if it were a misunderstanding, she didn't want to hurt her dad with unfounded accusations. That evening, Sophia quietly enlisted her tools of the trade: her phone, her keen eyes, and a hefty dose of patience. She pretended to do homework in her room but kept her door ajar to monitor the hallway. Thomas was working late that night, which was not unusual for a Thursday. Noah was engrossed in a video game downstairs after finishing his homework. That left Rachel alone in the master bedroom, presumably answering emails or relaxing. Around 10 p.m., Sophia heard the creak of her parents' bedroom door. She muted her laptop and slipped out of her room on silent feet. From the top of the staircase, she watched as her mother, now wearing jeans and a casual blouse instead of her earlier yoga gear, moved towards the front door with her purse in hand. Rachel paused to listen, perhaps checking that the kids were in bed or not paying attention. And then she quietly unlatched the front door and stepped out into the night, locking it behind her. Sophia's heart lurched. She left. At 10 o'clock at night, with Dad at work, there was no note, no calling out, "I'll be back soon." Nothing. Without hesitating, Sophia darted back into her room and peeked through the curtains. Sure enough, moments later, she saw the beams of the car's headlights sweep across the driveway as Rachel backed the SUV out and drove off down their street. Every instinct in Sophia's body screamed that she should call her father right now. But another part, the budding journalist and fiercely protective daughter, urged her to get proof first. Cold, hard proof. She hastily threw on a dark hoodie over her t-shirt, pulled on sneakers, and grabbed her phone and bike lock keys. Sneaking out wasn't something she'd ever really done. She was a straight-A, honor-roll, play-by-the-rules kid. But if her family was at stake, she was willing to step outside the lines. Outside, the autumn night air was brisk. A few stars peeped between clouds overhead, and the streets were quiet in their suburban neighborhood. Sophia silently wheeled her bicycle out of the garage, grateful that Noah's earlier tinkering with the door sensor hadn't armed anything yet to signal her escape. She had a hunch where to go. The unsaved number's area code wasn't local, but the call logs indicated long conversations in the evenings, and once Noah had innocently mentioned seeing Mom's car location on his app at a park across town late at night. At the time, she dismissed it as Noah's app glitching. But what if it hadn't? What if her mother had been meeting someone? Sophia recalled a note in the text log. One exchange had occurred at 6:45 that morning. "See you at the usual spot," the preview had read. The usual spot. That meant this had been going on a while, and they had a routine. Could it be her mother was visiting someone's home regularly? With her pulse racing, Sophia started cycling toward the main avenue, deciding to head in the general direction of her mom's yoga studio first. Perhaps from there she could guess. As she pedaled, she kept watch for the family SUV, but Rachel had a head start and was nowhere in sight. Boulder's streets at night had a serene emptiness. The Flatirons Mountains loomed darkly to the west, and a slight wind rustled fallen leaves along the sidewalks. Sophia pedaled faster, adrenaline overriding her nerves. She couldn't believe she was doing this, spying on her own mother. But the thought of her dad's face, the hurt she suspected was behind his eyes, propelled her forward. About 15 minutes later, near a residential complex not far from the yoga studio, Sophia spotted something. Her mother's silver SUV parked under a street lamp in front of a small condo building. She quickly swerved into the shadows of a tree across the street and stopped, breathing hard. Lights were on in one of the downstairs units of the condo, a warm glow against the drawn curtains. There was no sign of her mother outside. Likely Rachel had already gone in. Sophia took out her phone, hands trembling, and activated the camera. Zooming in from this distance at night was tricky. The image on her screen wobbled and blurred. She crept forward, leaving her bike hidden behind the tree. Each step on the pavement felt alarmingly loud to her own ears. Finally, she reached the edge of the condo's front lawn, crouching behind a low hedge. From here, She had a slightly better view of the front door of the lit unit. The number by the door read 3B. For a minute, nothing happened. Then, through the silence of the night, Sophia heard a muffled sound, voices maybe, and the faintest trace of laughter. The front door of Unit 3B opened. Sophia's heart pounded as she saw her mother step out onto the small porch light. Rachel was smiling, that same soft, secret smile Sophia had glimpsed in the kitchen. And she wasn't alone. A man appeared behind Rachel in the doorway. In the dim porch light, Sophia could make out that he was tall and fit, clad in a t-shirt despite the chill, with a kind of easy confidence about him. He had sandy blonde hair tied back in a short ponytail. Sophia recognized him instantly. Michael, one of the yoga instructors from her mom's studio. She had seen him a few times when she'd visited the studio after school. He was the new instructor Rachel had hired last spring. Sophia's stomach dropped. Michael leaned in and planted a quick, familiar kiss on Rachel's lips, an intimacy as if they'd done it 100 times. A surge of anger and betrayal roared in Sophia's ears. There it was, the proof. Her mother was kissing another man, not her father, but Michael, the yoga instructor, right here under the hush of night. She forced herself to steady the phone and snapped a burst of photos, biting her tongue to keep from sobbing or screaming. The shutter sound was muted, but Rachel and Michael were absorbed in each other, oblivious to the camera. After a moment, Rachel gave him a final parting smile and walked to her SUV, passing mere feet from Sophia's hiding spot. In the glow of the street lamp, her face looked flushed and happy, happier than Sophia had seen her in ages. It made Sophia's chest ache. Michael lingered in his doorway with a satisfied smile as Rachel started her car and pulled away into the night before he finally slipped back inside. Sophia remained frozen behind the hedge until the red taillights disappeared around the corner and the hum of the engine faded. Only then did she exhale the breath she'd been holding. She felt hot tears on her cheeks, not realizing when she'd started crying. Her hands shook violently as she looked at her phone. She had captured several photos. One clearly showed her mother on that porch, Michael's face in profile as he leaned toward her. Another caught the brief kiss, a blurry testament to their betrayal. The timestamps glared on the screen, 10:32 p.m. Sophia wiped her tears with her sleeve, taking a moment to collect herself. She carefully checked the photos again to ensure they were saved. Then with a shaky breath, she retreated to her bike. Her mind was a storm of emotions, fury at her mother, sorrow for her father, anxiety about what this would do to Noah, to their whole family. As she pedaled home in the dark, Sophia's resolve hardened. She had the evidence. Now she needed to do the hardest thing she'd ever done, show it to her dad. He deserved to know the truth, however painful. By the time she snuck back into the house and crept into bed, her father was home, fast asleep in the master bedroom. Alone, she noted. Perhaps her mother had chosen to sleep in the guest room or wasn't back yet. Sophia stared at her ceiling in the darkness, phone clutched to her chest. She felt older than her 14 years tonight. The family she thought she knew was built on trust and love. Now that foundation was cracking. Sophia knew that when she revealed what she'd discovered, nothing in their lives would ever be the same. Chapter 3. The Son's Discovery. Noah had always been the carefree one in the Bennett household. A boy lost in his world of code and inventions, but even he sensed a shift in the air that next day. At breakfast, he noticed Sophia and Dad talking in unusually hushed tones by the sink while he poured milk over his cereal. Sophia's eyes were puffy, as if she hadn't slept well. Dad rested a hand on her shoulder and nodded gravely at something she showed him on her phone. When Noah tried to wander over out of curiosity, they fell silent, exchanging a look that clearly meant it was private. It was odd. His family didn't usually keep secrets, at least not obvious ones. Noah shuffled back to the table, feeling a little left out and uneasy. Mom had already left early for an appointment before Noah even got up. Another strange thing, since she usually was there to hurry him and Sophia through the morning routine. Dad had said she had some errands and would be at the studio all day. On the car ride to school, the silence was heavy. Thomas drove with one hand on the wheel, the other rubbing at his chin. He did that whenever he was deeply worried. Sophia stared out the window, earbuds in, not even pretending to listen to music. Noah fidgeted with his backpack strap, wanting to ask what was going on, but something about the mood kept him quiet. He had a feeling it wasn't something good. All day at school, Noah found it hard to concentrate. His math worksheets blurred in front of him, and he missed an easy question in science because he was busy scribbling a new idea for his app's interface in the margin. But mostly, he kept replaying the morning. His sister's red eyes and determined whisper, his dad's troubled face. By the time he got home that afternoon, his friend's mom had carpooled him since both his parents were busy. Noah was brimming with nervous energy. The house was empty. No mom, no dad, and Sophia was still at her debate club meeting. Noah tossed his backpack aside and headed straight for the small makeshift lab corner in his room. It was really just his desk, cluttered with circuit boards, cables, and his laptop amid a galaxy of comic book stickers. He decided to distract himself by working on his home security app. If something was bothering Dad and Sophia, maybe he could solve it like solving a bug in code, by analyzing the data. First, he checked the new front door motion sensor he'd installed yesterday evening after dinner. It was linked to his laptop via Wi-Fi. Opening the app's debug console, Noah saw a log of timestamps. He expected entries for the morning when they all left, and afternoon when he came home. Those were there. But he also spotted entries timestamped much later the previous night. One at 10:04 p.m., door open, and another at 10:40 p.m., door open again. Noah frowned at the screen. 10 p.m. Everyone should have been home by then. The log indicated someone left at 10:04 and re-entered at 10:40. Had Dad gone back out for something after coming home late from work? Maybe a grocery run? But 10 p.m. was pretty late for that. And Dad usually came to say goodnight when he got home. No matter how late. Last night, Noah had dozed off around 9:30, and he vaguely remembered Dad tucking him in closer to 11. If Dad only got home around then, he couldn't have been the one leaving at 10. That left Mom. But why would Mom go out that late at night? She wasn't in her room when Noah went to bed. He assumed she was downstairs reading or watching TV. The thought of her quietly slipping out after he was asleep made his stomach twist with worry. Was something wrong? He saved the log data and decided to dig deeper. One of the features he'd been tinkering with was integrating location tracking for family phones. Last month, with his parents' permission, he'd set up the Find My Phone service on all their devices under one family account, primarily so they could all see each other's locations in case of emergency. It was mostly been used to track Noah's phone when he misplaced it under his bed. But now, Noah realized, he could use it to see where Mom had gone during that window of time. Using the programming interface for the tracking service, something he'd experimented with before to plot his dad's commute on a map as a project, Noah wrote a quick script. His heart thudded as he input his mom's phone ID and queried its location history for the previous night between 10 and 11 p.m. It took a few seconds to fetch and then coordinates popped up. He cross-referenced them with an online map. A red pin dropped on an address across town about a 15-minute drive away, in a neighborhood Noah wasn't familiar with. It wasn't near the grocery store or any place he knew Mom to frequent. Zooming in on satellite view, he saw it was a cluster of condo buildings and a small park nearby. Noah sat back in his chair, confusion mounting. Why would Mom drive to a random condo complex late at night? She didn't have any close friends who lived there that he knew of. Grandma and their relatives lived out of state. And if it were work-related, what, maybe a private yoga session? She would have mentioned it, right? He chewed his lip. A memory surfaced. A couple of weeks ago, he'd shown Mom a prototype of the location tracker. She'd laughed it off, saying, "So you'll know if I sneak off for ice cream without you, huh?" At the time, it was a joke. Now it seemed oddly prescient. Noah wasn't a naive little kid. He had heard whispers at school when friends' parents fought, or when a classmate's dad moved out for a while. He knew what the word affair meant in theory, but he never in a million years imagined it might have anything to do with his own family. Yet, as he stared at the map pin and the list of late-night timestamps, 10:04 p.m. departure, 10:18 arrival at this location, 10:40 departure from there, a terrible possibility formed in his mind. He tried to reason it away. Maybe Mom was planning a surprise, like picking up a secret gift for Dad's upcoming birthday. But Dad's birthday was months away. Or maybe she was helping a friend in need. It was possible, though Mom hadn't mentioned anyone. Noah didn't want to believe anything bad, but the data on his screen was hard to ignore. His mom had gone somewhere in secret late at night, and apparently it wasn't the first time. What if Sophia's puffy eyes and Dad's worry were because they knew something about this too? He needed advice on what to do with this information. And in their family, Dad was always the one who could figure out a problem logically. Maybe there was an explanation he hadn't considered. Determined, Noah printed out the map with the location pin and the list of coordinates and times. He also saved the digital logs on a flash drive. His hands shook slightly as he gathered these items. A part of him was scared to confront what it might mean, but another part, the scientist in him, felt a duty to report findings to the team. When Thomas came home that evening, he looked exhausted. It was nearly 7 p.m. He'd called earlier to say he had to stop by the office after picking Sophia up from her club. Now, as he stepped through the door, he gave a weary smile to Noah, who had been anxiously awaiting in the living room. "Hey, kiddo," Thomas said, dropping his laptop bag by the couch. "Where's your sister?" "She's in her room, working on something," Noah replied. Actually, Sophia had closeted herself away since coming home, saying she had to prepare something important. She barely said a word during the quick dinner of leftovers they each grabbed. Mom still wasn't home. Another anomaly. She had texted that she was dealing with something at the studio and would be back late. That in itself wasn't too unusual on a busy day, but given everything, it set Noah even more on edge. Thomas nodded and was about to head towards the stairs, presumably to talk to Sophia, when Noah blurted, "Dad, can I show you something?" It's important." There must have been an urgency in Noah's voice because Thomas stopped and turned fully to look at him. "Sure, buddy. What is it?" Noah led his father to the dining table, which he'd commandeered as a presentation area. His laptop was already set up with the map on the screen, and the printed map and logs lay beside it. Thomas raised an eyebrow, clearly curious, but also still weighed down by whatever had transpired earlier with Sophia. He sat down gently. This about your security app?" "Yeah," Noah said, his throat dry. He climbed onto the chair next to his dad. "I was testing the front door sensor and, well, I found something weird from last night." He pointed to the lines on his laptop, the timestamps. "See here? The sensor logged Mom leaving and coming back around these times." He then opened the map with a red pin. "And this is where Mom's phone went during that time. I tracked it using the family GPS thing." Thomas leaned in, and Noah saw his father's face change as he understood what he was looking at. A heavy silence fell. Thomas's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "You're saying your mom went here last night? Around 10 p.m.? Noah nodded and slid the printout forward. "Not just last night. I checked a few other nights from the past week." He clicked a few times, revealing multiple pins on different dates. 3 instances, all to the same condo complex around the same late evening hour. The app recorded similar patterns on Monday and last Thursday. "I wasn't logging every day, but on the days I had the system on, well, it looks like a pattern." Thomas took a long breath and closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Noah saw both pain and resolve. "How did you figure this out, Noah?" "I just noticed something was off," Noah admitted in a small voice. "Last night, the sensor I put up caught someone leaving. I thought it was odd, so I checked. I'm sorry if I was snooping. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." To Noah's surprise, his dad gave a faint, sad smile and pulled him into a one-armed hug. "You're a smart kid," Thomas said quietly. "And a good one. You have nothing to apologize for. You didn't do anything wrong." Noah felt a lump in his throat. His dad's embrace was reassuring, but it also confirmed what he feared. Something was very wrong, and now Dad knew that Noah knew it too. The secret was out in the open between them. Thomas released him and looked at the map again, eyes narrowed as if trying to maintain composure. "This address, did you look it up? Do you know who lives there?" Noah shook his head. "It looks like just apartments or condos. I thought maybe you knew someone there or maybe Mom has a friend who—" He trailed off. The unspoken words hung between them. Both of them suspected this wasn't some innocent visit to a friend. Thomas exhaled slowly. "Thank you for showing me, Noah." His voice was thick, but he stroked Noah's back gently. "I'm sorry you had to get involved in this." Noah's eyes stung suddenly. He blinked fast. "Dad, is she in trouble?" Thomas struggled to find an answer. He wasn't going to lie, yet he wouldn't dump the entire marital catastrophe on his 10-year-old. "I think Mom has made a big mistake," he said carefully. "One that's hurting the family. But I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to fix this and keep you and your sister safe, okay? Safe? The word made Noah's heart beat faster. Are we in danger? No, no, Thomas quickly assured. Not physical danger, I mean emotionally. Safe and secure as a family. He put a hand under Noah's chin, lifting the boy's face to meet his eyes. Your mom loves you, and so do I. That will never change. We're just having a problem that we need to work through. Noah swallowed hard. Because of that place she goes? Thomas pressed his lips together, then nodded once. Yes, because of that. A tear escaped down Noah's cheek before he could stop it. Did I do the wrong thing by checking? I didn't mean to spy. I was worried. Thomas pulled him into a hug again, firmer this time. You did nothing wrong, he whispered, his voice fierce with conviction. None of this is your fault. In fact, I'm proud of you for being so observant and brave enough to tell me. Sometimes grown-ups have secrets, and it's not a kid's job to handle them, but I'm glad you trusted me with what you found. Noah buried his face in his dad's shirt, feeling simultaneously relieved to have Dad's comfort and terrified of what would come next. What do we do now? He mumbled. Thomas gently rubbed Noah's back. Over his son's shoulder, he stared at the damning evidence on the table, the map, the logs, the undeniable proof of Rachel's deceit. His eyes hardened even as a tear of his own threatened. Now, he said softly, we call a family meeting. It's time to talk about the truth. Noah pulled back and wiped his face with his sleeve, nodding. A mix of dread and strange relief filled him. At least the uncertainty was over. Whatever happened next, they would face it together as a family. And as Thomas stood and placed a comforting hand on Noah's shoulder, the boy took a shaky breath. He had the sense that their lives were about to change in a big way, but at least he wasn't alone with his fears anymore. His dad knew the truth, and soon, so would everyone. Chapter 4. The Confrontation Deferred. It was nearly 9 p.m. by the time Rachel Bennett returned home that night. She stepped through the front door looking weary, a yoga mat bag slung over her shoulder and a stack of paperwork under one arm. The moment she entered the living room, however, she froze. Thomas was there, waiting. And he wasn't alone. Sophia and Noah sat on the couch side by side, their faces solemn and pale. It was an odd tableau, the children up past their usual bedtimes, quiet and tense as if awaiting judgment. Rachel's heart skipped. What's going on? She asked, forcing a nervous chuckle. Is everything okay? Thomas stood with his back to the fireplace, arms crossed. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were steely. We need to have a family discussion, Rachel. Right now. An uneasy silence filled the space. Rachel slowly set down her things on an armchair. Her mind raced with possibilities. Did something happen with the kids? Did someone get in trouble at school? But their expressions, they looked as if she were the one in trouble. Oh, okay, Rachel stammered, trying to smile. Can it wait till morning? Everyone looks tired and… No, Thomas said sharply, then softened his tone when Noah flinched. No, it can't wait. He gestured to the single armchair across from the sofa. Have a seat. Rachel lowered herself onto the chair, her knees suddenly weak. She glanced at Sophia, whose eyes blazed with an emotion Rachel hadn't seen before, a mix of hurt and anger. Noah was looking down at his hands, which were balled into fists on his lap. A cold prickle of fear climbed Rachel's spine. Thomas remained standing as if conducting a meeting. Sophia and Noah have something they want to show you, he said evenly. Something we all need to talk about. Rachel managed a small, shaky laugh. You're scaring me. Can someone please tell me what this is about? Sophia was the one to answer. The 14-year-old lifted her phone, screen already on, and with trembling fingers swiped to her photo gallery. Without a word, she stood and walked over to her mother, handing the phone to her. Rachel's eyebrows knitted in confusion as she looked down at the screen. There, illuminated brightly, was a photo of her and Michael standing on his condo porch. It was a bit grainy and zoomed in, but unmistakable. Michael's face in profile, Rachel's own smiling face as she leaned toward him. The timestamp on the image read 10:31 p.m. and displayed yesterday's date. Her blood ran cold. She flicked through the next images, one of the quick kiss, another of her walking to her car, oblivious to the camera. Each successive picture was a nail driven into her. each timestamp matching the nights she thought she'd been so careful, so discreet. I... What? Rachel's voice failed her. Her first instinct was denial. This isn't... I mean, you were following me? She looked up at Sophia in horror. Sophia stepped back, her jaw clenched. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but her voice was edged with steel. I wasn't going to just let you lie to us anymore. Rachel's mouth worked, but no sound came out. How had her daughter... She turned pleadingly to Thomas. Thomas, Thomas's face was grim. How long, Rachel? She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her eyes flitted to the photos again, then to her children's stricken faces. The truth was laid bare. There was no point spinning lies now. Perhaps somewhere deep, a part of her even felt a strange relief that the sneaking was over. Almost 6 months, she whispered, voice cracking. Since the spring. Sophia sucked in a sharp breath as if slapped. Noah's eyes welled with tears. Thomas's face tightened further, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Who is he? He asked, though the evidence had already answered that. Rachel swallowed the metallic taste of panic. Michael Summers, the instructor at the studio. Her gaze dropped in shame. You've met him once or twice. At the open house event, I think. Thomas let out a bitter exhale, not quite a laugh. Yes, I remember. Friendly guy, great with people. Clearly very attentive to the owner. Rachel winced. Thomas, I'm so sorry. She finally stood, legs shaking. It was a terrible mistake. I never meant to hurt any of you. Sophia's face crumpled, fury and pain breaking through. A mistake? You've been lying to us for half a year, sneaking out, cheating on Dad. On us? Her voice wavered, a sob threatening to escape, but she pushed it down with anger. Did you think about us at all? About what this would do to our family? Rachel reached out toward her daughter. Sophia, please, don't. Sophia stepped back as if the touch burned. Tears were streaming freely down her cheeks now. You don't get to please us. Not now. Noah was quietly crying, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. Mom, why? He asked in a tiny, broken voice. Don't you love Dad anymore? Don't you love us? That question lanced through Rachel's heart. She moved toward Noah instinctively, kneeling to try and meet his eyes. Baby, of course I love you. I love both of you, and I do love your father. I never stopped. Then how could you do this? Sophia burst out, voice cracking. You shattered everything. How are we supposed to trust you now? Rachel could barely see through her tears. I made a horrible mistake, she repeated, pleading for them to understand the inexplicable. I was lonely and stressed. The studio was consuming my time, and your dad... She glanced up at Thomas, then immediately backed down, unable to hold his gaze. Your dad and I were drifting apart. I felt like I was failing at everything, work, home, being a good wife and mother. Michael was... He was someone who listened, who made me feel appreciated when I felt invisible. Thomas flinched as if struck, and Sophia let out a scornful noise. Invisible? We're right here, Mom. Dad was always here for you. We all were. Rachel nodded frantically, tears falling. I know. It's not an excuse, it's just... I'm trying to explain where my head was. I didn't plan for it to happen, it just did. And by the time I realized what I'd done, I was in over my head and scared to come clean. Scared to come clean, so you lied to our faces every day, Sophia said, voice hollow now. Noah sniffled, leaning into Sophia's side. He looked at Rachel with heartbreak. I thought we were a good family, he whimpered. That undid Rachel. She crawled forward on her knees, reaching out toward her children beseechingly. We are a family, Noah. A family that can get through this. I will do anything to make this right. Please believe me. She clasped her hands together as if praying. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I'll end it with Michael, I swear to you. It's over. It's done. Just give me a chance to fix this. Thomas had been silent so far, letting the children speak. Now he took a deep breath and finally sat on the edge of the coffee table, facing Rachel. The distance between husband and wife was only a few feet, but it felt like a chasm. Rachel, he began, voice low and raw. The only reason we're even having this conversation calmly is because of Sophia and Noah. I didn't want them to witness a screaming match or worse. He paused, gathering himself. You say you want to fix this, but you can't take back what you did. Our trust, my trust, is broken. Rachel nodded miserably. I know. I know it will take time, a long time, to rebuild. But I'm willing to try. I'll do anything, Thomas, anything. Thomas exchanged a glance with his children. Sophia's face was stony, Noah's pleading. He ran a hand down his face, wiping away the tears he'd been fighting. For the children's sake, I'm willing to try counseling, he said slowly. At least so we can find a way forward without hurting them more. But he hesitated, and Rachel looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes, clinging to that but for dear life. But, Thomas continued, voice firming, I make no promises about our marriage, Rachel. Right now, I can't even look at you without... He closed his eyes briefly, without seeing you with him. Rachel's chin trembled. I understand, she whispered. I deserve that. Sophia sniffed and wiped her face angrily. She seemed exhausted from emotion. So, what happens now? Are you guys splitting up? The blunt question hung in the air. Noah looked from his sister to his parents in alarm. Thomas shook his head, though it was unclear whether in response to her question or just the overwhelming situation. For now, we focus on you two, he answered. We're going to arrange family counseling immediately. Your mother and I will figure out our next steps, but whatever happens between us, you both will be cared for and loved. That's our top priority. Rachel latched onto his words. Yes, absolutely, she said quickly. You kids will always come first. I will do everything to make sure you're okay. Sophia bit her lip, tears still slipping down. We're not okay, Mom. How could we be? Rachel bowed her head, fresh guilt crashing over her. I'm so sorry, she whispered for the 100th time, voice breaking. She looked at each of them in turn. Noah's wounded innocence, Sophia's betrayed fury, Thomas's cold sorrow. This was the cost of her actions. The reality of it struck her fully in that moment, and she could do nothing but sob. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Noah broke from Sophia's side and, to everyone's surprise, shuffled over to his mother. Rachel looked up as her son awkwardly patted her shoulder. Mom, please don't cry, he said in a tiny voice. I hate it. Despite everything, Noah's compassionate heart couldn't bear to see his mother in agony. Rachel cautiously wrapped an arm around him, and when he didn't pull away, she drew him into a hug, burying her face in his shoulder and weeping softly. I'm sorry, baby, she murmured. I love you so much. Sophia watched, her expression torn. Anger warred with love within her. Finally, she spoke quietly. We all need help. It was half statement, half plea. Thomas nodded. We will get help. He looked at the fractured family in front of him. His wife on her knees holding their son. His daughter standing stiffly with heartbreak in her eyes. The urge to either scream or collapse threatened to overtake him, but he held firm for them. Reaching into his pocket, Thomas pulled out a business card. I got this from our doctor a while back, he said, eyeing Rachel. A recommendation for a family therapist in town. We'll call first thing in the morning and schedule an emergency session if possible. Rachel wiped her tears, nodding fervently. Yes, okay, Thomas continued. Until then, we'll try to keep things civil. His voice had a slight tremor that betrayed the effort behind those words. For the kids, Rachel managed a trembling half-smile at Noah and Sophia. I can sleep in the guest room, she offered shakily, understanding that she'd lost the privilege of closeness. Thomas didn't object. He simply said, That's fine. A silence fell. The meeting, if it could be called that, had said everything and nothing. The children knew the ugly truth now. The parents had acknowledged it. But the path forward was utterly uncertain. Sophia stepped over and gently pulled Noah from Rachel's embrace. Come on, Noah, she whispered. Let's go to our rooms. Noah nodded, rubbing at his eyes. He looked back at his parents, dread in his young face. You promise you're not going to divorce? We'll be okay? The directness of the question made Rachel sob anew and Thomas flinch. Thomas opened his mouth, hesitating. We promise to do everything we can to make sure you and your sister are okay, he finally said. It was not a yes or a no, but it was the only honest commitment he could make. Noah accepted that with a slow nod, too drained to press further. Sophia guided him toward the stairs. Before leaving the room, Sophia turned and looked at her mother, who was still kneeling on the floor. "I hope it was worth it," she said quietly, voice laced with hurt. Then she led her little brother upstairs, their footsteps echoing in the heavy quiet. Now only Thomas and Rachel remained. She looked up at him, face streaked with tears, wanting to say something, to beg forgiveness again, or to thank him for not throwing her out on the spot. But Thomas had already averted his gaze. He walked to the armchair, picked up the yoga mat bag and papers she'd dropped, and set them on the floor out of the way, a polite but distant gesture. "You can have the guest room like you said," he murmured. "There are fresh sheets in there. We'll figure out a schedule for things tomorrow. I'll sleep in the master." Rachel nodded, standing shakily. "Thomas, I'm going to check on the kids," he interrupted, his tone flat. He moved toward the stairs, then paused, one hand on the banister. Without looking back, he added, "I meant what I said. We'll do counseling for them. But as for us, I can't make any promises, Rachel." Each word hit her like a fresh wave of despair. "I understand," she whispered. Thomas ascended the stairs, leaving her standing alone in the living room. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. The house was so quiet she could hear the clock ticking in the hall. In the span of a single night, her comfortable life had been dismantled under the harsh light of truth. And it was entirely her own doing. Upstairs, a door closed softly, Thomas, perhaps, peeking in to ensure their children were all right. Rachel wanted desperately to rewind time, to erase every poor decision that led to this, but reality was inexorable. Swallowing her grief, she picked up her discarded belongings and headed to the guest bedroom down the hall. Each step felt like lead. She knew sleep would not come easily, if at all. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of picking up the pieces, or at least tending to the wounds she had inflicted. But tonight, Rachel would lie in an unfamiliar bed, alone with her remorse, wondering how the family she loved so much had turned into a tableau of pain, and whether any semblance of their former happiness could ever be restored. Chapter 5. The Quiet Retaliation. 2 days passed in a haze of strained civility. In the Bennett household, conversation was minimal and mostly practical. Coordinating school drop-offs, quietly reminding Noah to finish homework, Sophia to eat something. Rachel and Thomas spoke only when necessary and always in private, their voices low and terse. At the children's insistence, an appointment with a family therapist had been made for the following week. But in the meantime, everyone moved carefully, as if any sudden noise might shatter the fragile truce. Beneath that brittle surface, however, currents of anger and hurt still surged. Thomas felt them every time he looked at the empty side of the bed in the master bedroom, or when he saw Rachel quietly crying over the sink when she thought no one was watching. He kept his composure for the kids' sake, but inside, something in him had turned to ice. At night, he lay awake replaying images of Rachel and Michael together. The deceit, the betrayal. A part of him longed to confront Michael physically, to pummel the man who helped wreck his family. But Thomas was not a rash man. His revenge, if he sought it, would be calculated and precise. On the third evening after the confrontation, an opportunity arose. Rachel was out of the house, ironically, at a special late class at the yoga studio, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy for her clients. Noah was at a friend's for a sleepover, arranged by Rachel, eager to shield him from the tense atmosphere for a night. And Sophia had finished her homework early and was quietly reading in the living room. Thomas approached his daughter, who sat curled in the armchair, a blanket over her legs and a faraway look in her eyes instead of on the book in her lap. "Sophia," he said softly. She looked up, snapping out of her reverie. "Yeah, Dad?" He took a seat on the couch facing her and chose his words carefully. "I've been thinking about how to handle this situation, not just here at home, but with the outside world." Sophia marked her page and closed the book, sensing this was serious. Outside world? Thomas's jaw tensed. About Michael and the studio. At the mention of that name, Sophia's expression darkened. She hadn't spoken of Michael since the confrontation, but Thomas knew his daughter. The betrayal had cut her deeply. She was likely wondering why the man responsible for seducing her mother and fracturing her family got to walk away without consequence. "What about them?" she asked quietly. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your mother wants to keep this whole thing private for obvious reasons. We'll go to therapy, try to heal internally. But Michael, he's just going on with his life, teaching classes, probably doing the same thing with other unwitting people. I can't stand thinking he'll face no repercussions for what he's done. Sophia's eyes flashed. He shouldn't get away with it, she said, venom in her usually gentle voice. Thomas felt a grim pride at her response. Still, he tempered his tone. I agree, but we have to be smart. We can't exactly announce to the world what happened without dragging our family through the mud. That would hurt you and Noah even more, and I won't do that. Sophia nodded. She appreciated that Thomas cared about protecting them from public scandal. So, what can we do? Thomas lowered his voice even though they were alone. We make sure that Michael's own actions catch up to him, quietly, surgically. Think of it as a form of accountability. Sophia straightened, listening intently. You're a talented writer and investigator, Soph, Thomas continued. If we look into Michael's background, perhaps we'll find things that the public should know. Things that would make people question whether they want someone like him teaching yoga or working with clients. Sophia's brow furrowed. His background, like qualifications or past behavior? Either. Both, Thomas said. A cold resolve had settled over him. Men like that often have patterns. Maybe there were rumors at his previous job, or he isn't properly certified to instruct. If the studio's reputation is built on trust and safety, a little doubt could topple his position. Sophia realized what her father was implying. If we expose him, he could get fired, or the studio could get in trouble. Her immediate feeling was a surge of vindication at the thought of Michael losing what he held dear as her family had. But almost as quickly, she hesitated. Dad, if the studio gets in trouble, that affects Mom's business too. Radiant Yoga was Rachel's livelihood and pride. If it suffered, so would she. Thomas's eyes were hard. She made her choice when she put that business and that man above her family. His tone softened when he saw Sophia flinch at its harshness. I know you're worried about your mom. I am too, in my own way. The aim isn't to ruin her, but she tied herself to this person, professionally and otherwise. If there are consequences, so be it. Sophia bit her lip. Part of her recoiled at the idea of kicking her mother while she was already down. But another part, the hurt, angry part, felt a grim justice in it. Rachel had risked everything for Michael. Maybe losing the studio's untarnished image was a price to pay. What do you need me to do? Sophia asked, voice quiet. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. Only if you're comfortable, honey. I was thinking you could use your journalism skills to dig up what you can on Michael. And then write it up, anonymously. You have that school blog you contribute to, right? Sophia managed a small smile for the first time in days. The irony that her school journalism hobby might be used for this. Yeah, it's online. I can publish under a pseudonym. No one would know it's me. Good, Thomas nodded. Write the truth, supported by facts. That's key. We're not slandering, we're revealing. And don't mention the affair. Focus on him. His qualifications, any past incidents, anything that would concern clients or authorities. Understood, Sophia said, already thinking like a reporter on a mission. Thomas then stood and moved to his work desk in the corner of the living room, opening his laptop. Meanwhile, I'll be sending a message of my own. Sophia watched him type for a moment. To who? He didn't look up. To some people who oversee yoga studios and instructors, effectively, the local health and licensing folks. In truth, Thomas wasn't entirely sure who had jurisdiction over a yoga studio, but he knew where to start. The Boulder County Health and Environment Department accepted anonymous complaints for businesses, and there was also a Yoga Alliance registry where one could verify an instructor's certification. He intended to cast doubt on Michael's legitimacy and the studio's compliance with safety protocols, enough to spark an inquiry. Thomas drafted an anonymous complaint to the Boulder County Health Department. Adopting the voice of a concerned client, he alleged that Radiant Yoga employed an instructor who lacked proper certification and that the studio might be ignoring safety standards. Unsanitized mats, overcrowded classes, things sure to trigger an inspection. He even hinted the instructor held unofficial after-hours sessions off-site, a suggestion bound to pique the interest of regulators. As Thomas hit send on the complaint form, he felt a grim satisfaction. It was a small push, but if he knew bureaucracies, even a small complaint could set off a chain reaction of inspections and headaches for the business. Meanwhile, at the dining table, Sophia was deep in her own task. She had her laptop open, search engines and social media profiles at her fingertips. Sophia quickly unearthed several red flags. Michael wasn't listed in any official yoga instructor registry, and she found evidence he'd been involved in a negligence lawsuit at a Denver studio where a student was hospitalized. Social media chatter suggested he left that job under dubious circumstances. It was all the ammo she needed for her expose. Armed with these facts, Sophia wrote a hard-hitting expose on the school's blog under a pseudonym, detailing the instructor's shaky credentials and checkered past. Once she was satisfied it was factual and damning, she hit publish with a single decisive click. Father and daughter sat in silence for a moment after launching their quiet missiles into the world. Sophia felt a strange mix of triumph and guilt swirling in her stomach. She had done what felt right to her, exposing a bad person. Yet a part of her was uneasy, knowing her mother would indirectly suffer from this fallout too. Sensing her turmoil, Thomas put an arm around Sophia. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "Sometimes doing what's right isn't easy, but shining a light on the truth is important." Sophia leaned against her father, closing her eyes. She hoped he was right. In that moment, she thought of Noah, sweet, trusting Noah, and steeled herself with a reminder of his earlier question. "I thought we were a good family." This was for Noah too, she told herself, to protect their family from further harm, to ensure people like Michael faced consequences. Upstairs, the quiet of the house pressed down on them. The die was cast. In the shadows of the living room, Thomas and Sophia remained side by side, two conspirators bound by hurt and a desire for justice. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 6. Ripples in the Studio. By the following week, the storm that Thomas and Sophia had quietly unleashed began to make landfall. Early Wednesday morning, Rachel arrived at Radiant Yoga to open for the 7 a.m. class, only to find a man and a woman waiting at the door, not clients, but officials. They introduced themselves as inspectors from the Boulder County Health Department. Rachel's stomach dropped as they explained that they'd received an anonymous complaint regarding her studio's hygiene and safety practices, and an inquiry had been opened. Flustered and confused, this was the first she was hearing of any complaint, Rachel nonetheless let them in and cooperated, heart pounding all the while. As the inspectors combed through the studio, checking the cleanliness of mats, counting emergency exits, asking about instructor certifications, Rachel excused herself to the reception desk and hastily called Michael. He hadn't arrived yet for his later class. "There are health inspectors here," she whispered urgently into the phone. "Did you hear anything about a complaint?" Michael sounded just as taken aback. "No, that's bizarre. We keep the place clean, don't we?" "Of course we do," Rachel replied, watching the officials test the temperature of the hot yoga room with a device. She swallowed hard. "They also asked to see our instructor's certification records." On the other end of the line, Michael went quiet for a beat. "Okay. Well, I gave you copies of my documents when you hired me." "Yes, I have them." "Somewhere," Rachel said, though at the moment she couldn't recall if she'd ever verified Michael's certificates deeply. It had been a chaotic time launching the franchise. She might have taken his impressive resume at face value. Now panic rose. "Just get in here soon, please. We might need to talk to them." By midday, the inspectors had finished their initial review. They pointed out only minor on-site issues: a fire extinguisher that needed recharging, a recommendation to clean the humidifiers more frequently. Nothing major. Rachel felt a wave of relief, thinking perhaps this was just a fluke check, until one inspector added, "We'll need verification of all instructors' credentials on file. Also, given the nature of the complaint, we may follow up with a review of class sizes and any off-site instruction activities. We'll be in touch with any findings." As they left, Rachel forced a polite smile, but inside she churned with anxiety. What off-site instruction, she wondered, and who would complain about them to the county? Her relief was short-lived. That afternoon, the studio's front desk phone rang incessantly and emails poured in from clients. Someone had forwarded around a link to an article, the one Sophia had written under pseudonym, and it was spreading through the yoga community like wildfire. Is it true your new instructor isn't certified and caused an injury in Denver? One longtime client demanded over the phone. Another emailed to freeze her membership until Radiant Yoga clears up these alarming issues. A local fitness forum caught wind, and a thread exploded with speculation. I heard Radiant Yoga's owner hired some sketchy teacher with a fake credential. Wasn't there just a health inspection there? Red flag. Yikes, I want a refund for my 10-class package. By early evening, half the week's classes were canceled because so many students dropped out or called in panicked inquiries. In an effort to control damage, Rachel suspended the remaining classes for the week due to unforeseen circumstances, blasting an apologetic email to all clients about a temporary schedule adjustment. That only fueled more rumors. Local news even picked it up in a small segment. A reporter from a community newspaper left Rachel a voicemail requesting comment on allegations regarding an instructor's qualifications and a potential safety investigation. The piece that ran online was brief but damning. Radiant Yoga Boulder, a popular studio run by local entrepreneur Rachel Bennett, is facing scrutiny after anonymous reports raised questions about instructor training and studio safety. The Boulder County Health Department confirmed an inquiry is ongoing. Reading that line on her phone, Rachel felt physically ill. Her name dragged out in the news next to words like scrutiny and inquiry. It was her worst professional nightmare come true. She confronted Michael in the empty studio after hours. The two of them huddled in the dim light of the lobby. Michael looked equal parts angry and nervous. "This is a smear campaign," he said, pacing. "Someone's out to get me, or you. Those things in that so-called article, they twisted facts. I did train in LA. I just didn't register with Yoga Alliance. And the lawsuit wasn't even directly my fault. The studio owner in Denver overpacked the hot class, and Rachel put up a hand. Her patience was frayed. "Michael, none of that matters right now. What matters is that our clients are losing trust. Headquarters has already called twice. They're worried the franchise's name is being tarnished. They might send a rep here." Michael ran a hand through his hair, which was pulled back in its usual short ponytail. "I'll talk to the classes myself. Explain my experience." "No." Rachel's voice was sharp. She softened it when she saw him bristle. "No, I think it's better you don't teach until this blows over. Maybe take a leave of absence for a week or two." He stared at her. "You're benching me?" "Rachel, come on! What else can I do?" she snapped, then immediately sighed, pressing fingers to her temple. "Clients are literally asking for refunds because of you. If I put you in front of them tomorrow, half of them will walk out. If any even show up, please, Michael, try to understand. I have to protect the business." Michael's face hardened. "Fine," he said after a moment. "Maybe I should just quit then if I'm such a liability." Rachel felt a stab of fear, and not just about losing him as an instructor. If he left, what did that mean for their personal relationship? But perhaps that was already doomed. She couldn't even think about that now. "Let's not make any rash decisions," she said carefully. "Just stay low profile. I'll handle the communications and figure out our next step." He gave a bitter laugh. "Communications? Maybe start by finding out who's slandering us, because this feels orchestrated." Rachel had a sinking feeling he was right. After he left, storming out with a terse, "Keep me posted," she sat alone behind the front desk, trembling from exhaustion and stress. Orchestrated. The word echoed in her mind. There were few people who would wish her ill. Competitor studios? Possibly, but this felt personal, too targeted. Her thoughts strayed unwillingly to Thomas. Could he? No, he wouldn't jeopardize the business she'd built, would he? Even if he hated what she'd done to their marriage, she couldn't imagine the father of her children stooping to anonymous sabotage. Then again, she never imagined he'd gather the kids to confront her infidelity either. Yet, that had happened. She felt utterly alone, beleaguered on all sides by crises of her own making, and perhaps someone's vengeance. Tears of frustration and fear welled up, but she angrily blinked them away. She had to get ahead of this. Damage control mode was all she knew now. Reassure clients, cooperate with authorities, and pray that by the time the family therapy session rolled around, she still had a business and a family left to fight for. That night, as a cold rain began to fall over Boulder, Rachel finally drove home from the studio. In the driveway, she spotted Thomas's car. He was home, likely having put Noah to bed and maybe waiting up for Sophia, who had an evening school activity. Summoning her courage, Rachel stepped out of her car, planning to go inside and calmly update Thomas on the studio situation. Perhaps if he saw how broken she was by this, he'd show a glimmer of sympathy. But as she approached the front porch, her steps slowed. Through the living room window, she saw Thomas's silhouette at his desk, lamplight illuminating his face. He looked stern, focused, and wholly unapproachable. Fear of another confrontation kept her rooted in place. Then she realized someone was watching her. Up on the second floor, in the window of Noah's bedroom, a small face was peering down through the rain-streaked glass. Noah had been unable to sleep. He'd heard muffled, tense conversations over the last few days, mentions of inspection and article. And though his parents tried not to discuss such things openly, he'd picked up enough. He knew somehow that his dad and sister had struck back at Michael and, by extension, at his mom's studio. At first, some secret part of Noah felt glad. He was still angry at Mom for hurting Dad and angry at Michael for existing. But now he watched his mother step out of her car, shoulders hunched and hair plastered by the drizzle, looking as defeated as Noah had ever seen her. She stood by the porch, face turned up toward the sky or toward his window, he couldn't be sure. With tears mixing into the rain on her cheeks, Noah's chest tightened painfully. That was his mom, crying in the dark. Regardless of her mistakes, he didn't want this, not utter ruin. Not for her to be so hurt. He saw Rachel swipe at her eyes and take a deep breath, squaring her shoulders before finally opening the front door to go inside. Noah eased back from his window as the door clicked shut downstairs. In his bed, Noah felt confusion and guilt churn. He had wanted consequences for the affair, yes, but this? His mom's livelihood on the brink, her reputation tarnished everywhere? He wasn't so sure anymore. It felt like everything was spiraling beyond their control. Through the floor vent, he could hear the murmur of his parents' voices now. Rachel's strained and quavering, Thomas's low and measured. He couldn't make out the words, but he could guess the conversation. She was likely explaining the studio crisis and Thomas. Would he be comforting or quietly satisfied? Noah rolled onto his back, staring at the dim ceiling. He wished it were morning already. He wished this awful storm, both outside and in their lives, would just blow over. Most of all, he wished none of this had ever happened. In his heart, Noah still loved his mother fiercely, despite her betrayal. Seeing her so defeated made him ache to reach out and hug her, to tell her he forgave her just so she wouldn't hurt anymore. But he was also afraid. Afraid of betraying Dad and Sophia by feeling that way, and afraid that maybe they'd all gone too far to ever put their family back together again. And so, as rain pattered against his window, Noah kept his lonely vigil in the dark, eyes open, wrestling with a new understanding. Sometimes, even doing what seemed right could lead to a whole lot of wrong. Chapter 7. Children's Dilemma. The next morning, the Bennett household felt as if it were balanced on a razor's edge. At the breakfast table, no one had much of an appetite. Rachel's eyes were red-rimmed from a night of crying that she couldn't fully hide, though she tried to put on a brave face by asking the kids about their homework and upcoming weekend plans. Thomas responded in monosyllables, sipping coffee, clearly preoccupied. Sophia and Noah exchanged uneasy glances. The air between their parents was a mix of tension and unspoken remorse. After the disastrous day before, Sophia had spent a restless night replaying everything. Her article had certainly done its job, maybe too well. She had watched the online discussions cascade, and what initially felt like triumph curdled into guilt as she saw her mother's anguish when Rachel came home. The image of Mom standing in the rain, small and sobbing, Sophia had peeked from the staircase, was burned into her mind. Noah, too, was unusually quiet, pushing his cereal around in the bowl until it went soggy. He kept peering at his mom as if assuring himself she was still there, that she wasn't completely broken. When Rachel left the table to take an anxious call from the studio, a client demanding a refund, Sophia leaned over to Noah and murmured, "We need to talk to Dad, together." Noah nodded solemnly. It wasn't until later that day, once Rachel had driven off to meet with a franchise representative, a meeting Thomas insisted she not skip. "We'll watch the kids, go handle it," he had said curtly, prioritizing business damage control over any personal conflict that the opportunity arose. Thomas was home on a rare personal day from work, ostensibly to handle family matters. He retreated to his study upstairs to sort through financial documents. Sophia guessed he might be gathering paperwork in case of a separation, a thought that made her stomach lurch. Sophia found Noah in the living room, listlessly playing a video game without sound. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he paused the game, looking up at his sister with troubled eyes. He seemed relieved that she had initiated. He had been working up courage to talk to her, too. "You doing okay?" Sophia asked gently, sitting beside him. Noah shrugged, blinking hard. "I don't know," he whispered. "Everything's such a mess. I I feel bad, Soph. I know Mom messed up, but now it's like her whole life is getting wrecked. And we kind of helped wreck it." Sophia felt a sting of tears in her own eyes, hearing her little brother articulate what she'd been feeling. She put an arm around him. "I know. I feel it too." Noah sniffed. "Maybe we went too far?" Sophia didn't answer immediately. She took a breath. "We wanted to help Dad and make sure Mom faced consequences, and to stop Michael from hurting anyone else. We did what we thought was right at the time. But now Mom's suffering. Really bad," Noah said, voice quavering. "Did you see her this morning? She could barely smile at us." Sophia nodded, her throat tight. Their vibrant, confident mother had been reduced to a ghost of herself in mere days, something Sophia had never imagined possible. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to tell Dad how we feel. He should know we're worried. That maybe this needs to stop now." "Can it stop? The article's out there. People are talking." "How do we stop that?" Noah asked, wiping his nose. "I don't know if we can stop it," Sophia admitted. "But we can at least tell him that enough damage has been done, that we don't want it to go any further. Maybe he can, I don't know, try to calm things down." Noah nodded, though he wasn't sure how Dad could do that either. But talking to Dad felt right. They had been a team in gathering the truth. Now they had to be a team in preventing this truth from utterly destroying their family. They found Thomas in his small upstairs study, a room lined with engineering textbooks and family photos. He was at Sophia's heart clenched. These were exactly the sort of things one would compile before meeting a lawyer. Thomas looked up in surprise when his children padded in and quietly shut the door behind them. "Hey, you two," he said gently. "What's up?" Sophia took a seat in the extra chair and Noah hovered near her. Up close, Thomas looked exhausted as well. Faint, dark circles under his eyes, lines of strain around his mouth. In the flurry of focusing on Mom, Sophia realized she hadn't truly considered how all this was affecting Dad, too. Still, she steeled herself. This conversation was necessary. "Dad," she began, we need to talk to you about what's happening. With Mom. And the studio." Thomas's expression grew guarded. He folded his hands on the desk. "Okay, go ahead." Noah piped up softly. "We didn't think it would get this bad." Thomas's eyes flickered. "What do you mean?" Sophia swallowed. "The things we did, the article I wrote, and the data we gave you, it caused a lot more damage than we expected. Clients are leaving the studio. Mom is... she's devastated, Dad." Thomas leaned back, his face hard to read. "Your mother brought this on herself by having the affair," he said, a touch flatly. "If she's facing consequences, those are the results of her choices." "We understand that," Noah said, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "We were so mad at her and at Michael, we wanted to do something, but now I just want things to not get worse. I don't want Mom to lose everything. We already might lose." He didn't finish, but they all knew he meant the family unit. Thomas let out a slow breath and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Kids, listen. When trust is broken like this, sometimes things do fall apart. I wanted to make sure your mother understood the gravity of what she did, and to protect you from being in a situation where her choices might continue to hurt us. Like if that man stuck around in her life, in her business." Sophia's voice sharpened, surprising even herself. "Is this really just about protecting us? Or is it about punishing her?" Thomas looked up, eyes flashing briefly, but seeing his daughter's earnest, pained face, the flash dulled. He thought carefully. Maybe it's a bit of both," he admitted quietly. "I won't lie to you. When I saw how easily she betrayed us, I wanted her to hurt too, the way we hurt." Sophia appreciated the honesty, but it still stung to hear. Well, she is hurt. A lot. And so are we. It's not what I wanted. Thomas swiveled his chair to fully face them, the tough facade he'd maintained cracking at the edges. Come here, he said softly, opening his arms. Noah stepped in first, and Thomas pulled him into a hug. Sophia, throat tight, moved in too, and Thomas wrapped one arm around her shoulders, drawing both children close. I'm sorry, Thomas murmured, voice thick. I never wanted either of you to feel guilty or responsible. If anything, that's on me. I set this in motion. Sophia buried her face in her father's shoulder. He smelled faintly of coffee and the familiar aftershave that usually comforted her. We helped set it in motion, she corrected in a muffled voice. We wanted to help you, but maybe this wasn't the right way. Thomas stroked Noah's back gently and rested his chin on Sophia's hair. In that moment, he felt the full weight of what had transpired. Not just Rachel's betrayal, but his own crusade for retribution. He had been so focused on balancing the scales, he hadn't fully seen how it had tipped the world for his kids. For a long moment, the three of them simply held on to each other, finding a small island of solace amid the chaos. Finally, Thomas spoke, voice low. Okay, we can't undo what's done, but if it means anything, I don't intend to push things any further. The article was out, the complaint made. I wasn't planning any more measures, he sighed. In fact, I think the situation will take its course without us now. Maybe it's time we step back. Sophia lifted her head, searching his face. You promise? No more secret plans? Thomas nodded. No more secret plans. From now on, we focus on healing, on figuring out where we go from here as a family. Noah sniffled. Does that mean you and Mom will be okay? Thomas's pause was noticeable. I don't know yet, he answered gently, not wanting to lie. But whatever happens with your mom and me, we'll always be your parents. We both love you so much. That's one thing that hasn't changed, no matter what else has. Noah looked down, tears dropping onto his sneakers. I love you, Dad. And I love Mom, too. I just want us to be a family. Thomas felt something break inside him. The pure, earnest longing in his son's voice carved through all his anger and resentment, leaving only sorrow. I know, buddy, he whispered, hugging Noah tighter. His vengeance had tasted satisfying for a moment, but seeing the collateral damage, he questioned if it had been worth it. Sophia pulled back slightly, wiping her face. His brother attended, perhaps they eventually. Sophia even cracked a joke about making sure the movie had no cheating subplot, please, which made all three of them laugh in a weary way. But privately, he knew one more difficult step loomed, one he wasn't ready to discuss with them just yet, but that he felt inevitable in his gut. As he watched Sophia and Noah head downstairs, Sophia slinging an arm around Noah as he animatedly suggested a superhero movie, Thomas's heart ached with love for them. They deserved stability and honesty and a chance to heal. He steeled himself with the realization that to truly protect them and provide that stability, he might have to follow through with the decision he'd been contemplating since the day of the confrontation. Formally breaking from Rachel, Thomas rubbed his face, feeling the weight of it. Together, he had promised them. He would keep that promise. But leading the family together into an uncertain, possibly divided future was still the path he foresaw. Torn between the vindication he'd sought and the guilt now gnawing at him, Thomas lingered a moment longer in the quiet study, gazing at a smiling Bennett family photo on his desk, taken 2 summers ago on a carefree vacation. Chapter 8, The Final Guillotine. A week later, on a gray Friday afternoon, Thomas climbed the steps of a modest brick building downtown that housed a law firm. The clouds hung low as if mirroring the weight of what he was about to do. Inside, once these are filed with the court, a process server can deliver the packet to your wife, Marjorie explained. Unless you prefer to hand them to her yourself. Thomas had considered this. Serving Rachel papers through a stranger felt cold, but handing them over personally felt even more brutal in some ways. Yet, after much thought, he decided he owed it to 15 years of marriage to do it face-to-face privately. I'll take them, he replied quietly, tucking the envelope into his briefcase. Marjorie gave him a sympathetic nod. She'd seen many such scenes play out. Remember, you're within your rights to request these measures, she said, reiterating what they'd discussed. Given the affair and the potential impact on the children, Citing harm to their welfare is a strong position for custody. Freezing, he was securing his kids' future and ensuring a fair division of property and preventing Rachel from possibly draining accounts to prop up her floundering studio or, a darker part of him thought, support her affair partner. On paper, it was the prudent, protective move. So why did he feel a leaden lump in his stomach as he drove home? That evening, the house was quiet. Sophia was at a friend's for a group study session, and Noah was engrossed in a new robotics project in his room. Rachel was in the kitchen cleaning up after a lonely dinner. The kids had already eaten earlier. She moved slowly, her usual energy sapped. In the past week, she had been polite and cooperative in family therapy and home routines, but also palpably sad. She and Thomas interacted civilly, even gently at times, but something between them remained irreparably fractured. Thomas entered the kitchen, heart thudding. In his hand, he clutched the envelope containing the divorce petition. He cleared his throat. "Rachel, can we talk for a minute?" Rachel turned, a plate in her hands. She wore an old sweatshirt and jeans, hair loose. She looked smaller somehow. "Of course," she said, trying and failing to muster a smile. She set the plate aside. Thomas's mouth went dry. Despite everything, delivering this blow felt awful, but he reminded himself the marriage was effectively over. Dragging it out would only prolong the pain for everyone. Steadying himself, he held out the envelope. "I have some papers. From my attorney. I filed for divorce." For a second, Rachel didn't react. It was as if she didn't understand the words, her tired brain refusing to process. Then, citing irreconcilable differences. The phrase felt clinical and inadequate to encompass their tragedy. And citing the impact on the children. He added that more quietly. Rachel's hand went to her throat. She blinked rapidly. Thomas, we're going to therapy. We haven't even given it time. I thought..." Her voice cracked. "I thought we were at least going to try." Thomas pressed his lips together. "I am trying to do what's best for the kids," he said, as gently as he could. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I can't be married to you anymore. Too much has happened." Rachel's eyes brimmed with tears. She accepted. "You're asking for full custody of Sophia and Noah?" Thomas swallowed. "For their stability, yes. I'm not aiming to cut you out of their lives, but I believe living with me primarily is best for them now. Given my it protects both of us." "Protects both of us," Rachel repeated hollowly. The papers in her hand rattled as she shook her head in disbelief. "My God, it protects you, you mean? From me? You think I'd what? Steal our money? Funnel it to Michael? Is that it?" Her hurt was bleeding into anger now, a desperate, wounded anger. "I didn't say that," Thomas said quickly. "This isn't about him. It's about ensuring a fair division and that resources remain for the kids. The student, and you're worried about me touching marital assets?" She slammed the packet down on the counter. "I have nothing, Thomas, nothing. My reputation is in tatters. My business is on life support. My marriage is..." Her voice broke. "Over. And now you'd take my children from me and lock away what little I have left? Why? To punish me further? Haven't I been punished enough?" Her words hung in the air, raw and accusatory. Thomas felt them like slaps. "This isn't about punishing you," he said, though even to his ears it sounded unconvincing. "It's about moving forward. We can't stay in this limbo. The kids need stability." Rachel gripped the edge of the counter. "Stability? How stable? That you have to save them from me." Thomas's throat tightened. "No, I don't think you're a bad mother. But your actions did hurt them, Rach, deeply. And right now, maybe I do feel I can provide a steadier environment. At least for a while." Rachel's shoulders shook. She covered her face with her hands. "I can't believe this," she choked out. I knew I might lose you, but I can't lose them, Thomas. Please." He instinctively stepped forward to steady her as her knees threatened to buckle. But she flinched away as if his touch were poison. "Don't," she managed, lowering her hands. Her eyes were puffy, makeup smudged. "I know I did this. I know it, but now it gave him no satisfaction, only a profound sadness." "This isn't about cruelty," he said softly. "It's about reality. Our marriage can't be fixed. You broke it and I broke any hope that remained when I chose this path. We both have to live with that. But the kids, they can still be okay. I truly believe this arrangement will be easier on them long term. Less fighting, clear expectations." Rachel stared at him, incredulous. "Easier? You think ripping their family apart will be easier? Newsflash, Thomas. It will break their hearts, and you know it. She clutched the divorce papers to her chest now, almost like a shield or a condemned prisoner's final warrant. But I guess their hearts are collateral damage, right? Just like my studio was collateral in your plan. Thomas stiffened. So she did suspect. I'm not discussing that, he said quietly. She gave a shaky nod, a bitter understanding. Oh, you don't have to. I'm not blind. I know you, and perhaps even our children, had a hand in how things unraveled for me professionally. Who else would know exactly where to strike? Fresh tears glistened. I suppose, in a way, I deserve it. But they don't. It was the page listing relief requested, primary custody asset injunctions, the cold, legal language of severance. At that moment, Noah stood in the kitchen doorway. The commotion had drawn him downstairs, unnoticed by his parents in their confrontation. He looked at the scene with wide, frightened eyes. His mother crying, clutching papers, his father standing rigidly across from her. On the floor, that single page lay face up, words like custody and petitioner requests visible. What's happening? Noah asked in a small voice, though he had already gleaned the answer. Both parents turned, startled. Rachel, he walked over and picked up the fallen page, tucking it back into the stack in Rachel's arms. Noah, he said gently, let's go into the other room for a minute. I need to talk to Mom alone. But Rachel stepped forward. No, she said, sniffing hard, summoning a last reserve of composure for their son's sake. She knelt down, bringing herself eye level with Noah. Sweetheart, your dad and I have decided we won't be staying married. Noah's face crumpled at the blunt truth, tears immediately spilling. No, he whimpered. Thomas moved to put a hand on Noah's shoulder, but Noah pulled back, running to Rachel and throwing his arms around her neck. Rachel let out a broken sob and held him tightly. Thomas felt his own tears slip free then. He wanted to reach out to them, to say something to make it hurt less, but no words came. Sophia arrived home just in time to witness the tableau. Her mother kneeling on the kitchen floor, clutching Noah, both crying uncontrollably, and her father standing over them with a grief-stricken face and an envelope in his hand. In an instant, she understood. No! Sophia gasped, dropping her backpack. Dad, what did you do? Thomas looked at his daughter, his voice catching. Soph, I filed for divorce. Saying it aloud to her felt like a punch to the gut. Sophia, she went. Instead, she clung to her mother, the two of them finding a sorrowful solidarity. Thomas stood over his family, or what used to be his family, feeling like a stranger in his own home. I'm sorry, he whispered, not even sure who he was apologizing to specifically. Rachel, the kids, all of them. It hung in the air without answer. Outside, the skies finally opened up in a cold winter rain, droplets pelting the windows. In the kitchen, Rachel rocked her children gently, all three crying quietly as the divorce papers lay scattered on the counter above them, words of separation stark against the white pages. To Rachel, those papers felt like a public verdict on her life, as damning and final as if a judge had pronounced her guilty in the town square. She pressed her lips to Noah's hair and squeezed Sophia's hand, tears falling in earnest. She had no idea how they would survive this rift, only that somehow, for the children's sake, they would have to. Thomas paused at the doorway, looking back at what he was leaving behind in that moment. His wife on the floor, cradling the two people they both loved most. He realized the final blow had fallen, severing the last ties of their old life.